Let me tell you something, my fellow Americans. There are moments in history, rare moments, when the echoes of our past come back with a force so profound, they remind us who we are. They remind us of what we stand for. And sometimes, just sometimes, they return not as a whisper, but as a thunderclap. Tonight, that thunder is rolling, and its name is Obama. Now, I've been out of the White House for a little while. Michelle and I have had some peace and quiet, raised our daughters, taken long walks, and yes, caught up on sleep. But I've been watching. I've been listening. And like many of you, I've felt the tremors running through this country. The division, the anger, the lies dressed up as truth, the cruelty paraded as strength. And so, my return, my voice is not about me, it's about us. It's about reclaiming the soul of this nation. And if that truth makes someone uncomfortable, so be it. Because let me be clear, this is not politics as usual. This is not red versus blue. This is not Obama versus Trump. This is a battle between the light and the dark, between truth and manipulation, between building bridges and building walls. And the time has come to draw that line clearly, decisively, and with a calm, unshakable courage. There's something we sometimes forget in the whirlwind of 24-hour news, viral tweets, and shouting matches disguised as political debate. We forget that democracy, this fragile, remarkable experiment in self-government, isn't a given. It's not something handed down like an heirloom that always stays polished and intact. No, democracy is a living thing. It breathes with our decisions. It bends with our fears and our hopes. It is tested not in moments of peace and prosperity, but in the storm, when everything feels uncertain, when anger comes easy and trust is in short supply. And this right now is one of those storms, because the truth is, democracy has never been about one person, one party, one ideology. It's about something deeper, something older than any of us. It's about a covenant, a sacred understanding that power in this country comes not from the top down, but from the bottom up, that every citizen, no matter how rich or poor, no matter their skin color or faith, holds a piece of that power. And with it comes responsibility. What we've witnessed over the last several years is a reminder, sometimes painful, sometimes startling, of just how vulnerable that covenant can be. We've seen institutions we once trusted get pushed to their limits. We've seen truth itself become a battleground. We've watched the pillars of democracy sway under the weight of lies, division, and a thirst for power unchecked by humility. And yet, in the face of all that, our democracy did not fall, it trembled. But it did not collapse. And that, my friends, is not because of some miracle. It's because of you. It's because of ordinary Americans who refused to give in to cynicism, who showed up in the rain to vote, who marched in the streets, who ran for school board and city council and volunteered at polling places, not for fame or fortune, but because they believed in something bigger than themselves. That's the power of this country. Not in palaces or gold-plated buildings, but in the quiet courage of everyday people who keep believing. Even when it's hard, even when it hurts, we talk a lot about threats from the outside, and yes, they're real. But the greatest threats to democracy never come wearing uniforms or waving foreign flags. They come wrapped in comfort. They come disguised as shortcuts. They whisper, "This system is broken, just burn it down." They shout, "The media is lying. The courts are corrupt, only I can fix it." And slowly, piece by piece, the light starts to dim. The press is silenced. The judges are bullied. The voices of the people are drowned out by the noise of a single man's ambition. But you see, democracy has an immune system. It's built into the bones of this nation. And that immune system is you. It's the young person who refuses to believe the lie that their voice doesn't matter. It's the grandmother who remembers segregation and sees the danger signs flashing once again. It's the immigrant who fled tyranny and knows the sound of creeping authoritarianism when they hear it. And here's the thing about resilience. It's not flashy. It doesn't always make headlines. But it is powerful. It's the power that says, "You may bend the truth, but we will speak it louder." It's the power that says, You may try to divide us, but we will come together anyway. It's the power that lives in teachers, organizers, veterans, artists, scientists, all holding the line in their own way, saying not on our watch. And now some folks might wonder, does it really matter? Is it worth it? The noise feels overwhelming. The corruption, the chaos, the constant spin. And to that I say, yes, it matters. Because democracy doesn't work on autopilot. It works when people care enough to fight for it. Not with fists, but with votes. Not with hate, but with courage. So when you feel tired, when you feel like none of it makes a difference, remember this: there were times in our history far darker than today. There were moments when the odds were longer, when the setbacks were brutal, when hope seemed naive. And yet, we came through. Not because we were perfect, but because we refused to give up. That's what democracy demands, not perfection, not purity, but participation and persistence. So keep showing up, keep speaking out, keep believing. Because the power of a democratic institution doesn't lie in marble walls or congressional seats. It lies in the hearts of people who believe that truth still matters, that kindness is not weakness, and that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish, not on our watch, and not on yours. There comes a time when a nation needs more than policy papers and press releases. It needs a voice not just loud but clear, not just passionate but principled, a voice that doesn't divide the room but fills it, a voice that reminds people who they are, even when they've forgotten. And when that voice returns, not with ego but with urgency, not for applause but for purpose, it stirs something inside us. It signals that the season of silence is over and the time for conscience has arrived. You see, in moments of confusion, when truth feels buried under waves of propaganda, when kindness feels drowned out by cruelty, people don't need to be shouted at. They need to be reminded. Reminded of the values that built this country. Reminded that decency isn't outdated, that compassion isn't a weakness, and that leadership isn't about who can bark the loudest, but who can carry the heaviest burdens with humility. That voice doesn't come back for vanity. It comes back because the stakes demand it. Because the country stands at a crossroads, and far too many have forgotten which way leads forward. And when that voice re-emerges, calm and steady, it doesn't try to erase what's come before. It acknowledges it. It looks us in the eye and says, we've been through the fire. But we're still here. We're not done. There's something powerful about seeing someone step back into the light. Not to rescue us, but to remind us that we were never powerless to begin with. To show us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, thoughtfully, with conviction born not in anger but in experience. This isn't about nostalgia. It's about necessity. Because when the political air gets thick with lies and hate, when fear is sold like candy and truth is traded like stock, somebody has to step up and say, enough. Somebody has to say, we're better than this. Not in theory, but in practice. In the way we talk to one another. In the way we treat strangers. In the way we decide what kind of country we want to be. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. That voice isn't perfect. It never claimed to be. It carries scars from battles fought and lessons learned the hard way. But that's what makes it real. That's what makes it trustworthy. Because it's not trying to win a headline or dominate a news cycle. It's trying to help us see a future where we rise, not because of one person, but because each of us chooses to believe again, in truth and unity, in the power of our collective will. In times like these, we don't need more noise. We need signal. We need direction. And that voice returning when it's most needed doesn't command us to follow. It challenges us to lead. It says, if you want a kinder world, be kinder. If you want honesty, tell the truth. If you want justice, stand up, especially when it's inconvenient. That's the kind of leadership that doesn't seek the spotlight. It earns it. It doesn't fuel itself on division. It rises on the strength of connection, on the belief that no matter our race, our religion, our background, we share the same dreams to live with dignity, to raise our families in peace, to know that our children will grow up in a country that believes in them. When that voice re-enters the national conversation, it doesn't rewrite the story. It helps us remember the chapters we've lived together, the victories we've fought for, the promises we made to ourselves, to each other, and to the generations yet to come. And so when that voice calls us again, not as spectators, but as citizens, it reminds us that democracy isn't a spectator sport, that freedom doesn't defend itself, that silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality, it's surrender. And that leadership, real leadership, is not about dominating a moment. It's about moving people towards something greater than any one person could ever achieve alone. In this moment, we are being asked, not with anger, but with hope, to stand up again, to find our courage again, to believe again. Not in a perfect past, but in a more perfect future. And that voice, echoing once more across the nation, is not saying, follow me. It's saying, walk with me toward the light, toward the truth, toward the country we still have the power to become, if only we choose to listen and then to act. There's a lesson that history teaches us over and over again. Leadership is not about spectacle, it's about substance. It's not about how much noise a person can make, but about how much responsibility they're willing to carry when the cameras are off and the lights go dim. In times of confusion, the nation doesn't just look for a commander, it searches for a compass. And in that search, the contrast between noise and vision, between self-promotion and service, becomes crystal clear. People may not always agree on every issue. We argue about taxes and healthcare, schools and climate. That's what a free society does. It debates, it questions, it challenges. But at our core, what we yearn for is something simpler. We want dignity. We want truth. We want leaders who respect the weight of their words and understand that the job isn't to be worshipped. It's to serve. And when we look back on what we've been through, when we reflect on the years of shouting and division, something becomes painfully obvious. Charisma without character is not leadership. Celebrity without compassion is not strength. The ability to dominate a headline does not mean you have the capacity to heal a nation. The job of a leader is not to make every conversation about themselves. The job is to make sure that every person in the country feels seen, heard, and valued even when they didn't vote for you. That contrast is what this moment has made impossible to ignore. On one hand, we've witnessed a style of politics driven by grievance, where loyalty is demanded and dissent is punished, where truth is bent and broken until it no longer resembles anything we recognize. On the other hand, we are reminded by example that leadership doesn't need to shout to be heard. It speaks through action. It uplifts without belittling. It inspires not by promising that only one person can fix everything, but by reminding us that all of us have a role to play. We've seen the difference between someone who builds walls of fear and someone who builds bridges of trust. One points fingers when things go wrong, the other rolls up their sleeves. One seeks division like it's a strategy, the other seeks unity like it's a duty. That difference matters, not just in how policies are shaped, but in how people feel when they wake up in the morning. Are they hopeful? Do they believe they're part of something bigger? Or are they afraid, wondering who will be targeted next? Politics is never perfect. Democracy is messy. But values don't have to be complicated. Tell the truth. Respect the rule of law. Honor your commitments. Treat people with basic human decency. These aren't partisan ideals, they're moral foundations. And when those foundations are shaken, we all feel it. The division isn't just on the news. It's at the dinner table, in the classroom, at the grocery store. It seeps into the air we breathe. But the good news is we still get to choose. We get to choose the kind of leadership we want to model for our children. Do we want them to believe that bullying is strength? That lying is clever? That empathy is weakness? Or do we want them to grow up believing that leadership is about lifting others up, even when it costs you something? That courage sometimes means telling people what they don't want to hear, but doing it with love and conviction. In this moment, the contrast is not just political, it's moral, it's spiritual. It's a choice between the easy path of ego and the harder road of service. And that choice doesn't just sit in Washington. It sits in every city, every town, every home. We don't need heroes with golden capes. We need neighbors with open hearts. We don't need saviors. We need citizens who are ready to build again. Not for the cameras, but for the kids who haven't learned yet what leadership looks like. That's why this moment matters. Not because one man failed, but because a nation realized it deserved better. Not because another man stepped up, but because the people are starting to remember what real strength looks like. Quiet, steady, grounded in truth and guided by love. The contrast couldn't be clearer. And that clarity, that light, gives us a chance to chart a new course. Not because we've forgotten who we are, because we finally remember. Change doesn't come all at once. It doesn't sweep in like a tidal wave, dramatic and overwhelming. Real change, lasting change, comes like the tide. It ebbs and flows. It takes time. It tests our patience. And yet, if you look close enough, you can feel it rising. You can feel the current shifting. That's the power of momentum. And in this moment, it's beginning to lean towards something better. We're living in a time where a lot of folks have been discouraged. They've seen ugliness elevated to prominence. They've watched decency dismissed like a weakness. They've been told that outrage is the only language that matters, that empathy is out of style, and that the loudest voice in the room is somehow always right. But here's the truth: the American people are wiser than that. They're not just watching, they're learning. And slowly but surely, they're starting to turn away from the noise. You can feel it in the conversations happening in living rooms and barber shops, in classrooms and church basements. People are asking different questions now. Not who can win the next news cycle, but who can bring us back together. Not who can get the most clicks, but who's thinking about my kids, my job, my community. That shift in the questions we ask, that's the beginning of a new momentum. There was a time not too long ago when cynicism was winning, when it felt like decency had lost its voice, when the only thing louder than the lies was the silence of those who should have known better. But something's changing. The silence is breaking, the courage is returning, and more people are standing up, not for a party, but for principle. And you can tell because of the way fear is starting to lose its grip. For years, fear was used like a tool. Fear of the other, fear of change, fear of losing status, fear of being left behind. But that tool is starting to rust because people are realizing that fear might rile up a crowd, but it can't build a future. You can scare people into submission, but you can't scare them into greatness. Greatness requires faith. Faith in each other. Faith in the idea that we don't have to tear each other down to lift ourselves up. Momentum shifts when people begin to believe again. And that belief isn't naive, it's earned. It's built on the hard work of organizers in neighborhoods no one's talking about. On teachers who keep showing up, even when their pay doesn't match their passion. On young people who've seen more struggle than they should have, but who still believe their voice matters. That's what moves the needle. Not rhetoric, but resolve. Not theatrics, but truth. We've seen this shift before. We've felt it. When people start tuning out the showmanship and tuning into their conscience. When they realize that dignity doesn't come from wealth or power, but from how you treat the most vulnerable person in the room. When they understand that politics isn't a game, it's a reflection of who we are and what we value. And in that reflection, folks are beginning to say, we want something better. We deserve something better. And now, make no mistake, those clinging to the old ways feel it too. That's why the volume has gone up. That's why the tactics have become more desperate. Because when you've built your platform on division, unity feels like a threat. When you've thrived on chaos, order feels like a loss. But what they're missing is that this momentum isn't about one person taking the lead. It's about all of us deciding we won't go backward. The public trust is a delicate thing. It's not granted by polls or rallies. It's earned day by day in the quiet choices people make about who they believe, who they follow, who they're willing to fight for. And the tide is turning. People are choosing leaders who reflect their best selves, not their worst instincts. Leaders who can take a punch without throwing one back.